Suicide, self-defense, war, and death penalty.
Right. Throw them all out there.
Yep,
Okay.
there you go.
All right.
They're all forms of killing someone.
Yes,
Okay.
that's true.
So let's start with the first one.
Okay.
Is suicide a murder?
It is the taking of the premeditated taking of a life.
Okay.
One's own life, obviously.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'd label that in specific murder genre, but I mean, it's the taking of human life.
Self-defense. Am I doing a murder?
No, you're not doing a murder. Self-defense.
Okay.
And
defending somebody else?
Not doing a murder.
According to the Bible.
Okay, according to Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really interesting in the Bible. So there is actually in the Bible, so using Old Testament scriptures, like when the laws were established, there's actually put into scripture this notion of what's called cities of refuge.
Okay.
And the cities of refuge are actually, so like if you read in Numbers 35 and in Joshua 21, there are these cities of refuge that are established where, let's say you unintentionally kill someone, or you're defending yourself or another, kill somebody, you're able to flee to a city of refuge.
Oh.
Okay.
Like base, you can't tag me?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, exactly.
Okay.
So, because in that time, it was very much on the family. Like if a family member dies, or is murdered, or their life is taken, you have the right to go kill the person who killed your family member.
We should bring that back.
You think that's the way we should just roll with it? So, oh Lord, I can't even imagine how that would go down. And so that's kind of the way it was. So the individuals would not want to be killed by these family members, so they would flee to these cities of refuge where an actual trial would take place. And as long as they're there in that city of refuge, they can't be touched.
You kill them, we kill you.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
You can't be touched. But if they're like in the city of refuge and it's like, hey, I'm gonna go for a walk, leave the bounds of that city of refuge. They're outside the walls.
Right.
And families like just hiding out in the woods, ready to get them. Oh well. I mean, like
it's two people that want to kill each other standing nose to nose on the outside of the line.
Pretty much. Yeah, as soon as you cross this line, you did.
How many feet have to be over the line?
Well, it's pretty clear.
He killed my brother.
And so, yeah, I guess you were hoping you wouldn't be pushed over the line.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would not go well. So there's actually provisions given for individuals that unintentionally take someone's life or is defending oneself or another.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. War.
Boy.
Is war murder?
Yeah.
Who's technically doing the murders?
Right. Okay.
The guy who tells the guy to go kill someone, or the guy that goes and kills someone?
Right. So, yikes. Man, war is just messy.
Or is none of it murder?
War is just messy. So, all right.
And we're probably going to get to all these in their own episodes, but we're just talking about it in this context.
Yeah. All right. So I'll dabble in here just for a second.
Yeah.
Just to get to just war theory. I mean, like you said, we could do a whole episode just on just war theory.
Well, we will eventually.
Okay. And so, but just war theory basically is saying, hey, if you're a country that is being invaded or you're protecting yourself, it's just for you to defend yourself.
Okay.
Right?
Right.
And so very similar to like self-defense. Okay. It's like you actually are, it is just for you to defend yourself. And so that's just war theory in a nutshell. I mean, that's a very
right. But what about the other side?
That's where it gets real dicey for me.
The conquest.
Yeah. I mean,
someone's got to do it at some point, right?
Right. I mean, that's what they all do.
Yeah.
So I think anytime you're going, like, let's say, I mean, you're invading another country, right? You're choosing to invade, not to protect yourself, not to defend yourself, but you're just invading because you want that land or that territory. Yeah, I mean, murders are going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how else to get around that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, murders are going to happen. So,
and talking about this is always topical.
Well,
without bringing up our specific war murders going on currently right now.
Right, we will.
Yeah.
Yeah, without getting into the weeds of those.
Right.
Yeah, it's tough, man.
Okay.
War is not.
So you're saying
good.
Invading for no reason other than we want your stuff, and killing people doing it. That's murder.
Yes, murder's going to be involved. I mean, I don't know how else you're going to. I mean, because you're going to kill people.
So is it the people that are killing people that are doing the murder, or is it the person telling the people to go kill the people that are doing the murder?
That's a good question. Because, like, if you're just a soldier,
right,
you're taking orders,
right,
you have to go execute such orders, right? Even if that means taking the life of other people,
right.
So is that murder? I'm going to say for the government that is giving the commands.
That's the murder.
The blood falls on their hands.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's more of Joseph speaking than Bible speaking.
Well, does the Bible say anything about it?
No, the Bible doesn't doesn't get into anything like that. Now,
didn't God tell his people to go do this though?
Yes. Okay, so now we're getting into a very specific kind of niche of war where there's God actually commanding his people to go and take territories and land.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
should we save this for?
Absolutely. Let's save that because that's gonna
save that for war.
Yeah,
episode?
Let's do a war episode.
Okay.
Yeah, because that's just gonna take up the whole thing.
All right.
But so here's what Yeah. Okay. I'll leave it there.
Okay.
Let me leave it there.
All right. So here's the last one. Death penalty. I think this is all of them, right?
Yeah.
Is there any other thing? Because I couldn't think of anything
of
places
forms of killing people.
Killing people. Yeah.
Suicide, self-defense, or death. I mean, you've got similar. I don't know if I need to say similar to war. Actually, a little different would be like, for example, your police department, sheriff's departments.
Okay,
right.
But
so
that's usually usually
right, self-defense, or it's happening in the line of duty,
right?
And so, yes, that's its own own world.
All right, so death penalty.
Death penalty.
We're gonna do this as its own episode at some point. Also,
okay,
probably.
All right. So again, here's my
just real quick.
All right, so here's my sketch of the death penalty. All right, so first of all, I'm gonna have to read Romans 13, 1-4, because if I don't, I won't be able to give the best context for what I'm going to say next. So, Romans 13.
You wrote the most about this one in the notes.
I got a lot to say about it. So, actually, so my final paper in one of my ethics classes was just on this.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
So, I got a whole lot to say about death penalty and my position on it, and my thoughts on it. But again, we'll save that for its own episode.
Does that
probably?
Do your thoughts line up with what you think the Bible says about it?
I think the Bible. Let me read this.
Yeah. Okay.
And give context. All right. So in Romans 13, 1-4, let everyone submit to the governing authorities, since there is no authority except from God. And the authorities that exist are instituted by God. So then, the one who resists the authority is opposing God's command, and those who oppose it will bring judgment on themselves. For rulers are not a terror to good conduct, but to bad. Do you want to be unafraid of the one in authority? Do what is good, and you will have its approval. For it is God's servant for your good. But if you do wrong, be afraid, because it does not carry the sword for no reason. For it is God's servant, an avenger that brings wrath on the one who does wrong. All right. So Romans 13 is pretty clear that the government has been given a quote unquote sword from the Lord to be able to execute wrath on the one who's doing wrong. Okay. So do I think that countries have the right to have death penalties? Yes. Okay. And they're not considered murder. Countries have that right of death penalties. But as I said earlier, I'm not the biggest fan of a death penalty, even though.
So that verse is saying, hey, you can do this, but you don't necessarily have to.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And because if I'm looking at Old Testament, where it's very much, life for a life, eye for an eye, then I mean it's pretty clear in Old Testament that you
murder someone,
you're gonna get murdered.
You're getting murdered.
Right.
Okay.
Pretty clear. Okay. So if someone wants to build an argument on the basis of those Old Testament passages in Romans 13, like, I understand that. Okay. It just seems to me that Jesus takes this up, that Jesus says, but there's a higher road to go. There's a higher road we can take
than killing people.
Than just killing people.
Than the government having a death penalty.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, again, I'm going to put this. So what I'm going to be doing is reading from Matthew 5, where obviously it is, referring to more the way that individuals are supposed to respond as opposed to governments. Okay. But I'm going to extrapolate some principles from that to put it into our context in a governmental say. So in verse 38 of chapter 5, so this is Jesus speaking. That's the Sermon on the Mount, so pretty well known. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you, don't resist an evildoer. On the contrary, if anyone slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. As for the one who wants to sue you, take away your shirt, let him have your coat as well. And then going down to verse 43, you've heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. For if you love those who you love, or who love you, what reward will you have? Don't even the tax collectors do the same? And so, what I'm drawing out from this is that, yes, we've heard it said, love your neighbor, hate your enemy. We've heard it said, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. But Jesus is saying, but there's a higher plane we can walk on.
If they murder you once, let them murder you again.
Okay, no. So if they murder you, you're murdered, right? But if they murder you, do we have to respond in kind?
Okay.
Right? So I think that's kind of what this is getting to, right? Do I have to respond in kind to an action taken by another? Okay.
Right.
So if someone is murdered, do we as a society have to respond in kind to that person? And I'm saying we don't have to. Okay. And I understand there's all these arguments over, well, if we just kill them, it's actually cheaper in the long run, saving space. Well, that's actually been proven false, because yes, you're right. There's meals, all those kinds of things, but to actually get someone to the death penalty position, do you know how many trials and retrials that has to happen? It's unbelievable the cost.
Just leave them in a cell and give them food.
that's kind of the way I'm at.
Yeah.
I get it. They've broken their societal contracts. They shouldn't be free to engage in society again. Let's lock them in a cell, give them food. They die when they die. That's my perspective.
No more trials. We got jaywalking tickets to get to.
Well, yeah, and this for me kind of feeds on the idea of the sanctity of life.
Okay.
So, in other words, if I'm viewing all life as having sanctity, then even though someone may have broken a societal contract, if you want to put it that way, with society through murder, did they lose the sanctity in their life? And that's given to them by the Lord. And I would say no.
Right.
Okay. But I also understand the one that says, well, but you know what? It was God who said in Genesis 9, you know what? Someone's life made in the image of God was taken.
But that's the Old Testament. It doesn't matter anymore.
I don't
right?
know.
That's the law. It doesn't matter anymore,
no,
right?
I mean,
We're
no, I don't want to just chunk the whole Old Testament.
Do something with our cheeks or something now. Right?
Okay. Oh Lord. All right. So no, I am for the moral code and principles that are found in the Old Testament. Okay. And so, however, Jesus does seem to say, you've heard this said in the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. And he's not saying it's wrong, but he's saying, but there is another plane we can live on. There's a higher plane now that we can live on. And so I just feel like in the context of a death penalty, that the higher plane we can live on is, okay, I mean, you've been found guilty. Mm-hmm. You are guilty. Done. Now, one of the interesting things about murder is that in the Old Testament, and this is a little different than today. In the Old Testament, you had to have two witnesses,
okay,
that saw the murder for that person to be found guilty and killed.
Now it's two camera angles.
and I think that's where kind of the idea of the death penalty, like in regards to the death penalty, like you would want to, even for a government, they need to make absolutely sure this is the person that did it, right? And so circumstantial evidence ain't going to get you there.
Well, I don't like the death penalty.
Yeah, why don't you like it?
Because I don't think the government should have that option in their back pocket.
Okay, why not?
Because I've heard of instances where it's corruption in government trying to frame and get people murdered because they murdered, as in get people through the death penalty process so that to cover up stuff that the government's doing. And
gotcha.
I don't like them. It's like I don't want them having that tool in their tool belt.
Gotcha.
Type thing to do whatever they want.
Right. So
with anybody.
Why trust corrupt people with that type of power? Is what you're saying.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. And it's hard for me to argue that because even if they're not just
like that's what David did.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Sure.
Not really. He used war to do it, not the death penalty, but that's what he did.
Yeah.
Yeah. He manipulated the system to get
what he wanted.
So if that's an option in the system, then people in government can manipulate that to get what they want.
Right. And to be clear, we're not saying that every judge and every lawyer or DA or whatever
I'm not saying, but
corrupt.
It's possible because the law exists.
Sure. Because we're dealing with we're dealing with fallen humanity.
Right. And we're talking about murder. So,
right.
So, this would be a form of murder. This is someone
taking another life.
If what David did was murder, this is similar enough.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I would agree with that.
Okay.
But the difference obviously with the death penalty as opposed to what David was doing was David was killing a known innocent.
Right.
And the death penalty, you're killing someone who's
you can kill a known innocent.
It can happen.
Yeah.
It
can happen.
It's
so I don't like that. That's
what you're saying is the option is out there.
The option is there.
Right.
So I don't like it.
Sure.
No, just keep them locked up.
Yeah.
And there's been things like DNA evidence is
Correct.
proven people innocent years and years later, and
Right.
and yeah,
Oops, our bad.
Oops, we murdered that guy.
Right.
So that wasn't even corruption.
Yeah,
but
that
the corruption
was just
option
mistakes.
still,
Yeah, and I think that's where you're dealing with humanity too, right? Because humans make mistakes.
Yes.
And so, no, I do wish that I wish the death penalty would be taken off the table. I'm in agreement with you. And
we're going to get hate for this one.
Oh, we're going to get killed for it.
Yes. You didn't. That's awesome.
No pun intended.
Good job. All right, next question.